Jeff Bezos is worth $180 billion. But there's an American family that makes him look broke. The Mellon family controlled more wealth at their peak than the combined net worth of today's top 5 billionaires. We're talking about a dynasty that owned entire industries, shaped presidential elections, and accumulated so much power that they literally rewrote America's tax laws to benefit themselves. For over 2 centuries, they've been the puppet masters pulling strings behind every major economic event in American history. But what nobody knows is how they built this empire through methods so ruthless that other robber barons called them extreme. While names like Rockefeller and Carnegie are household names, the Mellons deliberately stayed in the shadows, accumulating wealth and influence that dwarfed their famous competitors. They didn't just get rich, they controlled the flow of money itself. At their peak in the 1920s, the Mellons controlled assets worth over $500 billion in today's money. That's more than the GDP of most countries. They owned the banks that funded America's biggest companies, the oil that powered the nation's growth, and the aluminum that built the modern world. When the Great Depression hit, they didn't lose money. They bought up distressed assets for pennies on the dollar. The secret behind their success wasn't just business acumen. It was their willingness to blur the lines between private wealth and public power in ways that would be illegal today. They turned government positions into personal profit centers, used insider information to corner markets, and created tax loopholes so sophisticated that the IRS is still trying to close them. This is the story of how one Irish immigrant's son built America's most powerful financial dynasty, and how his descendants continue to shape your life today without you even knowing it. When Andrew Mellon died in 1937, he left behind a fortune so vast that his estate paid the largest inheritance tax in American history up to that point. But that was just the money they could find. The real Mellon wealth was hidden in a labyrinth of trusts, foundations, and offshore accounts that his lawyers had spent decades perfecting. Conservative estimates put the family's total assets at over $50 billion in today's dollars. But financial historians believe the true number was closer to $100 billion. To put that in perspective, that's more than Bill Gates and Warren Buffett combined. What most people don't know is that the Mellons weren't just rich. They were the architects of modern American capitalism. While other wealthy families focused on single industries, the Mellons created an integrated empire that touched every aspect of the economy. They owned the banks that funded industrial expansion, the companies that produced raw materials, and the political connections that shaped favorable policies. This wasn't just about accumulating money, it was about accumulating power over the American economy itself. The story begins in 1818 with Thomas Mellon, a dirt-poor Irish immigrant who arrived in Pennsylvania with nothing but determination and a willingness to do whatever it took to succeed. He would have been shocked to learn that his great-grandson would one day serve as the most powerful Treasury Secretary in American history, essentially running the country's finances for over a decade. Behind the Mellon success was a family philosophy that bordered on obsession. Money was the only true measure of worth, and any method of acquiring it was justified as long as it wasn't technically illegal. They didn't just bend rules, they rewrote them. The family operated with a level of coordination that would make modern corporations jealous. Each generation had clearly defined roles. One son would run the banks, another would handle industrial investments, a third would manage political connections. They shared information, pooled resources, and moved as a unified force through American business circles. But their true genius was staying invisible. While Rockefeller faced congressional investigations and Carnegie dealt with public scandals, the Mellons quietly accumulated more wealth than both families combined. They understood that real power meant never having to explain yourself in public. Let me take you back to 1818, when a 28-year-old Irish immigrant stepped off a boat in Philadelphia with a plan that would reshape American capitalism forever. He couldn't have known that he was starting a dynasty that would control American finance for the next 2 centuries. The America that Thomas Mellon entered was a nation of farmers and small merchants. Banking was primitive, industries were scattered and underfunded, and the concept of integrated business empires didn't exist. The richest Americans were landowners and merchants who dealt in local markets. Thomas saw something different. He envisioned a world where money itself could be manufactured through careful manipulation of credit, debt, and investment. While other immigrants focused on farming or trades, Thomas studied the flow of capital. He spent hours watching how successful businessmen operated, learning their methods and identifying their weaknesses. The Pennsylvania of the 1820s was perfect for his ambitions. The state was rich in natural resources but poor in capital. Local businesses needed loans to expand. Farmers needed credit to survive seasonal fluctuations, and the growing industrial sector was starving for investment. Thomas positioned himself as the solution to all these problems. What made Thomas different from other ambitious immigrants wasn't just his intelligence. It was his complete lack of sentimentality about business. He viewed every relationship as a transaction, every favor as an investment, and every competitor as a problem to be solved. This cold-blooded approach to wealth accumulation would become the Mellon family trademark for generations. But to understand how a single immigrant created America's most powerful financial dynasty, we need to go back to his first deal in 1834, a transaction so brilliant and ruthless that it would define the family's business philosophy for the next 200 years. Chapter 1. Humble Roots. Thomas Mellon's first fortune came from exploiting desperate farmers during Pennsylvania's worst economic depression. In 1834, a financial panic swept through Pennsylvania's agricultural regions. Crop failures, bank closures, and collapsing commodity prices left thousands of farmers facing foreclosure. Most people saw tragedy. Thomas Mellon saw opportunity. While other potential investors waited for conditions to improve, Thomas moved aggressively into the distressed property market. He had spent years building relationships with local bank officials, lawyers, and courthouse clerks, the people who controlled the foreclosure process. When the panic hit, he was positioned to buy prime farmland for a fraction of its value. The key to his strategy was cash. While most business was conducted through credit and promissory notes, Thomas had painstakingly accumulated actual currency by working multiple jobs and living in near-poverty conditions. When desperate farmers needed immediate cash to avoid foreclosure, Thomas was often the only buyer with money in hand. His first major purchase was a 200-acre farm outside Pittsburgh that had been valued at $3,000 just 2 years earlier. The owner, facing immediate foreclosure, sold to Thomas for $400 cash. Within 5 years, as the economy recovered, Thomas sold the same property for $4,500, an 11-fold return on his investment. But Thomas wasn't content with simple property speculation. He recognized that the real money wasn't in buying and selling land, it was in controlling the financial mechanisms that made those transactions possible. You see, most property sales in 1830s Pennsylvania involved complex financing arrangements. Buyers rarely had full cash, so sellers had to accept promissory notes, mortgages, and other forms of debt. Thomas realized that by positioning himself as a moneylender, he could profit from both sides of every transaction. He began offering short-term loans to property buyers at interest rates that would be considered predatory today, often 20–30% annually. When borrowers inevitably defaulted, Thomas would foreclose and acquire properties at even lower prices than direct purchase. He was essentially manufacturing his own distressed property inventory. The business model was brutal but brilliant. Thomas would identify financially struggling property owners, offer them short-term loans with impossible repayment terms, then foreclose when they inevitably defaulted. Local records show that between 1835 and 1840, Thomas initiated over 200 foreclosure proceedings, an extraordinary number for a single individual in that era. What made this strategy particularly effective was Thomas's understanding of human psychology. He would approach struggling farmers with sympathetic offers of emergency assistance, positioning himself as their savior rather than their exploiter. Many farmers later claimed they had no idea they were signing documents that would result in losing their properties. Here's what's interesting about Thomas's early success. He wasn't just accumulating property, he was accumulating information. Every loan, every foreclosure, every property transaction gave him deeper insight into local economic conditions. He knew which areas were most likely to recover, which industries were growing, and which individuals were positioned for future success. By 1840, Thomas owned over 3,000 acres of prime Pennsylvania real estate and had established himself as one of the region's most important moneylenders. But more importantly, he had identified his next target, the emerging banking industry. The truth is, Thomas's property speculation was never the end goal. It was preparation for something much larger. He had studied the banking systems in New York and Philadelphia and recognized that Pennsylvania's financial infrastructure was primitive by comparison. Local banks were small, undercapitalized, and focused on serving existing wealthy families rather than financing economic growth. Thomas saw an opportunity to create a new kind of bank, one that would actively seek out investment opportunities rather than passively accept deposits. He envisioned an institution that would function as both a bank and an investment fund, using depositor money to finance his own business ventures. In 1841, he sold a portion of his real estate holdings for $50,000 cash, enough capital to establish his own financial institution. But Thomas wasn't interested in opening just another small-town bank. He had studied the operations of successful banks in major cities and understood that the real profits came from coordinating multiple financial services under one roof. Look at what Thomas created. T. Mellon & Sons wasn't just a bank. It was a comprehensive financial services company. They offered traditional banking services like deposits and loans, but they also provided real estate financing, business consulting, investment management, and what we would now call private equity services. The bank's first major client was Andrew Carnegie, who needed financing for his early steel investments. This relationship would prove crucial to both families' future success, but at the time, it was just another example of Thomas's ability to identify promising opportunities before his competitors. What set Thomas apart from other bankers wasn't just his capital or his connections. It was his systematic approach to risk management. While most banks made lending decisions based on personal relationships and general impressions, Thomas developed detailed financial analysis methods that allowed him to assess the true profitability of potential investments. He required detailed business plans, financial statements, and collateral assessments from all borrowers. More importantly, he insisted on maintaining ongoing oversight of his investments rather than simply collecting interest payments. This hands-on approach allowed him to identify problems early and take corrective action before losses became severe. By 1850, T. Mellon & Sons had become Pittsburgh's most successful bank, with assets exceeding $200,000, equivalent to about $6 million today. But Thomas wasn't satisfied with regional success. He had bigger plans, and they centered on his eldest son, Andrew, who was already showing the ruthless business instincts that would make him one of the most powerful men in American history. The foundation was set. Thomas had created not just a fortune, but a systematic approach to wealth accumulation that his descendants would refine and expand for generations. But this was just the beginning of the Mellon Empire. Chapter 2: Banking Empire. Andrew Mellon transformed his father's regional bank into America's second-largest financial institution through methods that would be considered illegal today. When Andrew took control of T. Mellon & Sons in 1882, the bank had assets of $2 million. By 1920, it controlled over $100 million and had become the primary financier for America's largest corporations. This wasn't gradual growth, it was systematic conquest of the American financial system. Andrew's strategy was elegantly simple. Instead of competing with existing banks, he would make them dependent on his capital. While other banks focused on local markets, Andrew positioned T. Mellon & Sons as the lender to other financial institutions. When smaller banks needed cash to meet withdrawal demands or fund large loans, they came to Andrew. The genius of this approach was leverage. By lending to other banks, Andrew could control far more capital than his institution actually possessed. A $1 million loan to a regional bank might give him influence over $10 million in assets. Within a decade, Andrew had created a network of dependent financial institutions that effectively functioned as branches of his empire. But Andrew's real breakthrough came from recognizing the connection between banking and industrial development. While traditional bankers waited for established companies to request loans, Andrew actively sought out emerging industries and provided the capital that would make them dominant. His first major success was aluminum. In 1886, a young inventor named Charles Martin Hall approached Andrew with a new process for producing aluminum cheaply. Every other financier had rejected Hall's proposal as too risky. Andrew saw the potential and provided $250,000 in startup capital, equivalent to $7 million today. The result was the Pittsburgh Reduction Company, which later became Alcoa. Andrew didn't just provide financing, he took controlling ownership and integrated the company into his growing industrial empire. By 1900, Alcoa controlled 90% of American aluminum production, generating millions in profits for the Mellon banks. You see, Andrew had discovered something that other financiers missed. The most profitable investments weren't in established industries, but in technologies that could create entirely new markets. While his competitors fought for shares of existing businesses, Andrew was creating monopolies in emerging sectors. His next target was oil. The petroleum industry was fragmented among hundreds of small companies, most of which lacked the capital for large-scale operations. Andrew began systematically acquiring oil companies throughout Pennsylvania and West Virginia, consolidating them under Mellon control. The key to his oil strategy was vertical integration. Instead of just owning oil wells, Andrew acquired refineries, transportation companies, and distribution networks. By 1910, Mellon-controlled companies handled every aspect of oil production, from drilling to retail sales in the northeastern United States. What made Andrew's approach particularly effective was his willingness to use predatory pricing to eliminate competition. When independent oil companies entered his territories, Andrew would temporarily slash prices below cost until the competitors went bankrupt. Once they were eliminated, prices would return to previous levels. This strategy required enormous capital reserves, but Andrew had solved that problem through his banking network. He could fund temporary losses in the oil business using deposits from his banks, essentially using other people's money to finance his monopolistic practices. Here's what's remarkable about Andrew's business model. He wasn't just building individual companies, he was creating an integrated economic system where each component supported the others. His banks provided capital for his industrial ventures, which generated deposits for his banks, which funded expansion of his industrial operations. By 1915, the Mellon financial empire included controlling interests in aluminum, oil, steel, coal, and transportation companies worth over $50 million, about $1.3 billion in today's money. But Andrew wasn't content with regional dominance. He had identified his next target, the federal government itself. The truth is, Andrew had recognized a fundamental limitation in his business model. No matter how much wealth he accumulated, his ability to expand was constrained by federal regulations and tax policies that favored established Eastern financial interests. To overcome these obstacles, he would need to control the government institutions that created those policies. Andrew's opportunity came in 1921, when President Warren Harding offered him the position of Treasury Secretary. Most businessmen would have seen this as a temporary interruption of their private affairs. Andrew saw it as the ultimate business opportunity. Look at what Andrew accomplished as Treasury Secretary. He reduced the top tax rate from 73% to 24%, eliminated the excess profits tax on corporations, and created new tax loopholes that allowed wealthy individuals to avoid most federal taxes. These changes weren't just policy preferences, they were specifically designed to benefit his family's business interests. Consider the aluminum industry tax provisions Andrew championed. He argued that aluminum production required such massive capital investments that companies needed special tax breaks to remain competitive. What he didn't mention was that his family controlled 90% of American aluminum production, meaning these industry-wide tax breaks primarily benefited Mellon enterprises. The same pattern applied to oil depletion allowances, banking regulations, and international trade policies. Andrew systematically used his government position to rewrite federal law in ways that advantaged his business empire while appearing to serve the broader public interest. What's interesting is how Andrew justified these actions. He genuinely believed that policies benefiting his businesses would ultimately benefit the entire economy. In his view, the Mellon enterprises were so important to American prosperity that helping them succeed was equivalent to helping America succeed. This philosophy allowed Andrew to pursue increasingly aggressive strategies without feeling conflicted about potential ethical issues. When critics accused him of using public office for private gain, he responded that his private gain was inseparable from public benefit. Meanwhile, back in Pittsburgh, Andrew's brothers were expanding the family's industrial holdings using the favorable policies he had created in Washington. Between 1921 and 1929, Mellon-controlled companies acquired over 200 competitors, creating near monopolies in aluminum, oil refining, and several other sectors. The coordination between Andrew's government position and his family's business activities was so systematic that some historians consider it the most sophisticated corruption scheme in American political history. But everything was technically legal because Andrew had helped write the laws that governed his own conduct. By 1929, the Mellon family controlled assets worth over $300 million, equivalent to roughly $4.5 billion today. They were the second wealthiest family in America, behind only the Rockefellers. But unlike the Rockefellers, who faced constant public scrutiny and government investigations, the Mellons had managed to accumulate their wealth while maintaining virtual invisibility. The banking empire that Thomas had started as a small-town money-lending operation had evolved into a sophisticated financial machine that touched every major sector of the American economy. But Andrew's greatest achievement wasn't the wealth itself. It was creating a system that would allow future generations to maintain and expand that wealth regardless of changing economic conditions. However, this systematic approach to wealth accumulation was about to face its greatest test. The stock market crash of 1929 would destroy many of America's great fortunes, but for the Mellons, it would represent the opportunity of a lifetime. Chapter 3: Steel Monopoly. While Andrew Carnegie became famous for building America's steel industry, the Mellons secretly controlled more steel production than Carnegie ever did. The key difference was strategy. Carnegie built his empire through public acquisitions and dramatic business battles that made newspaper headlines. The Mellons accumulated steel assets quietly, using their banking connections to acquire companies during financial distress, when owners were desperate to sell and media attention was focused elsewhere. Andrew Mellon's steel strategy began in 1899 with a seemingly minor investment in a struggling Pittsburgh steel company called Union Steel. The company was facing bankruptcy due to a combination of outdated equipment, high labor costs, and competition from Carnegie's operations. Most investors saw Union Steel as a lost cause. Andrew saw it as a perfect acquisition target. Using his banking network, he provided emergency financing that saved Union Steel from immediate bankruptcy. But the loan terms were extraordinary. If the company couldn't repay within 2 years, ownership would transfer to T. Mellon & Sons Bank. The company's executives, facing the choice between certain bankruptcy and possible survival, accepted Andrew's terms. Union Steel never repaid the loan. By 1901, it was entirely Mellon-owned, giving Andrew his first major steel production facility. But this was just the beginning of a systematic campaign to acquire steel companies throughout Pennsylvania and Ohio. The genius of Andrew's approach was using other people's money to finance his acquisitions. When a steel company faced financial difficulties, Andrew would arrange for one of his dependent banks to provide emergency financing. When the company inevitably defaulted, the bank would foreclose and transfer ownership to a Mellon-controlled entity. This strategy allowed Andrew to acquire steel companies without using his own capital, while maintaining the appearance of being a helpful financier rather than a predatory acquirer. Local newspapers typically reported these transactions as Mellon Bank saves struggling steel company rather than Mellon acquires another competitor. You see, Andrew had identified a fundamental weakness in the steel industry's financial structure. Most steel companies were heavily leveraged, meaning they depended on continuous credit to meet their operational expenses. By controlling the region's major sources of credit, Andrew could essentially force steel companies into situations where selling to him was their only alternative to bankruptcy. Between 1901 and 1907, Andrew acquired controlling interests in 23 steel companies, using variations of this strategy. The acquisitions weren't random. They were carefully chosen to create an integrated production system that could compete with Carnegie Steel and other major producers. Here's what made Andrew's steel empire different from Carnegie's. Instead of focusing on volume production, Andrew specialized in high-value steel products that required advanced technology and specialized expertise. His companies produced specialty steels for emerging industries like automobiles, aircraft, and precision machinery. This focus on high-value products generated much higher profit margins than commodity steel production. While Carnegie's companies competed primarily on price, Mellon steel companies competed on quality and innovation. By 1910, Mellon-controlled steel companies were generating twice the per-ton profit of their larger competitors. The truth is, Andrew's steel strategy was never about beating Carnegie in direct competition. It was about positioning the Mellon family to benefit when the steel industry eventually consolidated. Andrew correctly predicted that the industry's fragmented structure was unsustainable and that a few large companies would eventually control most American steel production. When J.P. Morgan created U.S. Steel in 1901 by acquiring Carnegie Steel and several other companies, most observers assumed this would end opportunities for independent steel producers. Andrew saw it differently. He recognized that U.S. Steel's size would make it slow and bureaucratic, creating opportunities for smaller, more efficient competitors. Andrew's steel companies focused on markets that U.S. Steel couldn't serve effectively: custom orders, specialized products, and regional markets where personal relationships mattered more than scale economies. This strategy allowed Mellon steel companies to coexist profitably with U.S. Steel, rather than competing directly. By 1915, the Mellon family controlled steel production capacity of over 2 million tons annually, roughly 15% of total American steel production. This made them the second largest steel producer in the country, but unlike U.S. Steel, their operations were highly profitable and efficiently managed. What's remarkable is how Andrew integrated his steel holdings with his other business interests. Steel companies needed coal for fuel, so Andrew acquired coal mines. They needed transportation for raw materials and finished products, so Andrew invested in railroad companies. They needed financing for expansion, so Andrew's banks provided capital. This integrated approach allowed Andrew to capture profits at every stage of the steel production process. When his steel companies bought coal, they were buying from Mellon coal mines. When they shipped products, they were using Mellon-owned transportation. When they needed capital, they were borrowing from Mellon banks. Look at the numbers from 1920. Mellon steel companies reported profits of $15 million, but the total profit to the Mellon family was closer to $40 million when you include profits from coal, transportation, and financing services. This integrated business model generated almost 3 times the profit of standalone steel production. The coordination between different Mellon businesses was so sophisticated that competitors struggled to understand how Mellon steel companies could offer lower prices while maintaining higher profitability. The answer was that Mellon companies weren't just steel producers. They were components of a larger economic system designed to maximize total family wealth. Andrew's steel empire reached its peak during World War I, when demand for specialty steels skyrocketed. Military aircraft required advanced alloys that only a few companies could produce. Naval shipbuilding needed specialized armor plates. Artillery production required precision steel components. Mellon steel companies had positioned themselves perfectly for wartime production. Their focus on high-value specialty products meant they could meet military specifications that mass producers couldn't match. Between 1914 and 1918, Mellon Steel Company's profits increased by over 400%. But Andrew's greatest achievement wasn't the wartime profits. It was using those profits to acquire additional steel assets when other companies faced post-war adjustment difficulties. When military contracts ended in 1919, many steel companies found themselves with excess capacity and mounting debts. Andrew used his accumulated capital to acquire these distressed companies at bargain prices. Between 1919 and 1922, he added another 12 steel companies to his empire, increasing Mellon steel production capacity to over 4 million tons annually. Here's what's interesting about the post-war acquisitions. Andrew wasn't just buying steel companies, he was buying the technology and expertise that would define the industry's future. Many of the companies he acquired had developed innovative production methods or specialized in emerging steel applications. Consider the Crucible Steel Company, which Andrew acquired in 1921. Crucible had developed advanced techniques for producing tool steels and specialty alloys that were essential for the growing automotive industry. By acquiring Crucible, Andrew gained access to technologies that would become increasingly valuable as American manufacturing became more sophisticated. The same pattern applied to several other acquisitions. Andrew systematically identified steel companies with unique capabilities or technologies, then acquired them when financial pressures made their owners willing to sell. This strategy allowed him to assemble a collection of steel assets that was technologically superior to much larger competitors. By 1925, the Mellon steel empire included 35 companies with combined annual production capacity of 6 million tons. This represented about 20% of American steel production, making the Mellons the largest private steel producers in the world. Yet most Americans had never heard of Mellon steel companies because they operated under their original names rather than a unified corporate identity. This invisibility was deliberate. Andrew understood that public attention would invite government scrutiny and political pressure to break up his steel empire. By maintaining the appearance of independent companies, he could avoid the antitrust investigations that plagued more visible monopolists like Rockefeller and Carnegie. The steel monopoly was now complete, but it was just one component of the larger Mellon empire. Andrew's next target was even more ambitious, controlling America's energy supply through systematic acquisition of oil and coal resources. Chapter 4. Oil Dominance. By 1920, the Mellon family controlled more oil production than Standard Oil, but they accomplished this so quietly that John D. Rockefeller didn't even know he had been surpassed. The key to their success was geography. While Rockefeller focused on refining and distribution, the Mellons concentrated on discovering and controlling new oil fields before their competitors even knew they existed. Between 1900 and 1920, Mellon-backed exploration teams discovered oil reserves worth over $500 million in today's money. Andrew Mellon's oil strategy began with a simple observation. Standard Oil was so focused on protecting its existing monopoly that it was missing opportunities in emerging oil regions. While Rockefeller fought government antitrust lawsuits and managed his vast corporate bureaucracy, Andrew quietly assembled teams of geologists and engineers to identify untapped oil resources. His first major discovery came in 1901 in Texas, just months after the famous Spindletop gusher made headlines worldwide. While other investors rushed to buy land near Spindletop, Andrew's geologists identified a different formation 200 miles away that showed similar geological characteristics. Andrew purchased 50,000 acres of Texas land for $2 per acre before anyone else recognized its potential. When his drilling team struck oil 6 months later, the land was worth over $500 per acre. This single investment generated a 25,000% return and established the pattern for Mellon oil operations. Find resources before competitors, acquire land cheaply, then develop systematically. The Texas success attracted attention, but Andrew was already moving to his next target, the untested oil regions of Oklahoma, Louisiana, and California. Using profits from Texas, he assembled the largest private exploration operation in American history. You see, Andrew had identified a crucial advantage that Standard Oil couldn't match: speed. Rockefeller's companies were so large and bureaucratic that major decisions required approval from multiple corporate layers. Andrew could authorize new exploration projects within days and have drilling teams operational within weeks. This speed advantage allowed Andrew to acquire prime drilling rights in new oil regions before Standard Oil even knew they existed. Between 1902 and 1910, Mellon exploration teams discovered major oil fields in Oklahoma, Louisiana, California, and West Virginia. Each discovery was developed through a separate company to avoid attracting attention to the overall scope of Mellon oil operations. Here's what made Andrew's oil empire different from Rockefeller's. Instead of building a single massive company, Andrew Andrew created dozens of smaller companies that operated independently but shared resources and information. This structure made the Mellon oil empire virtually invisible to competitors and government regulators. Consider the coordination between different Mellon oil companies. When one company needed drilling equipment, it could borrow from other Mellon companies at favorable terms. When geological surveys identified promising areas, the information was shared across all Mellon operations. When new technologies were developed, they were implemented throughout the entire network. This coordination allowed Mellon oil companies to operate more efficiently than their larger competitors, while maintaining the flexibility of smaller organizations. By 1915, the combined production of Mellon oil companies exceeded that of any other private oil operation in America. The truth is, Andrew's oil strategy was never just about finding and producing oil. It was about controlling the entire energy ecosystem that powered American industrial growth. Oil was just the beginning. Andrew also systematically acquired coal mines, natural gas reserves, and electrical generation facilities. The coal strategy was particularly brilliant. Most oil companies viewed coal as a competing energy source, but Andrew recognized that coal and oil served different markets and could be developed simultaneously. While oil was ideal for transportation and heating, coal was essential for steel production and electrical generation. Between 1905 and 1920, Andrew acquired coal mines throughout Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky, with combined annual production capacity of over 20 million tons. This made the Mellons one of America's largest coal producers. But again, most people didn't realize it because the mines operated under different company names. Look at how Andrew integrated his coal and oil operations. His oil companies needed energy for drilling and refining operations, which they purchased from Mellon coal companies. His coal companies needed transportation for their products, which they obtained from Mellon-owned railroad companies. The coordination generated profits at every level while reducing costs throughout the entire system. What's remarkable is how Andrew used his energy empire to influence other industries. Steel companies needed reliable coal supplies, so Andrew offered long-term contracts at favorable prices, but only to companies that also purchased other Mellon services. Railroad companies needed fuel for their operations, so Andrew provided oil products in exchange for favorable shipping rates for other Mellon businesses. This leverage allowed Andrew to gradually extend Mellon influence throughout the American economy. By 1920, hundreds of companies depended on Mellon energy supplies, making them vulnerable to pressure if they competed with other Mellon interests. The coordination was so systematic that some historians consider it the first modern example of vertical integration across multiple industries. Andrew wasn't just controlling energy production. He was using energy control to influence steel production, transportation, banking, and manufacturing. Andrew's energy empire reached its peak during World War I, when military demand for oil and coal created unprecedented opportunities. The US Navy needed reliable fuel supplies for its expanded fleet. Military vehicle production required massive amounts of steel, which required coal. Aircraft production needed specialized fuels that only a few companies could produce. Mellon energy companies were positioned to meet all these needs. Their oil production supplied military vehicles and naval vessels. Their coal production powered the steel mills that produced military equipment. Their specialized refining capabilities produced aviation fuels for military aircraft. Between 1914 and 1918, Mellon Energy Company's profits increased by over 600%. But more importantly, the war gave Andrew access to government contracts that provided detailed information about future military needs and technological developments. Here's what's interesting about Andrew's wartime activities. He used his position as a major military supplier to gain advanced knowledge of government policies and strategic plans. This information allowed him to position his companies advantageously for post-war opportunities. For example, Andrew learned in 1917 that the government planned to sell surplus military equipment after the war ended. He used this knowledge to acquire storage facilities and transportation assets that would be needed to handle the surplus sales. When the sales began in 1919, Mellon companies were the primary intermediaries, generating millions in additional profits. The same pattern applied to post-war energy demand. Andrew's government contacts provided early information about plans for highway construction, suburban development, and industrial expansion, all of which would increase demand for oil and coal. He used this advanced knowledge to acquire energy reserves in regions that would experience the greatest growth. By 1925, the Mellon energy empire included oil production facilities in 7 states, coal mines in 5 states, natural gas operations in 4 states, and electrical generation facilities in 3 states. Combined annual energy production exceeded that of any other private company in American history. But Andrew's greatest achievement wasn't the scale of his energy operations. It was creating a business model that generated profits regardless of energy price fluctuations. When oil prices were high, his oil companies generated exceptional profits. When oil prices were low, his industrial companies benefited from reduced energy costs. This balance meant that the Mellon family's total wealth continued growing steadily, even during periods when other energy companies struggled with volatile commodity prices. Between 1920 and 1930, Mellon family wealth increased from 100 million to over 400 million, making them the richest family in America. The energy empire was now complete, but Andrew had even bigger plans. His next goal was to use his accumulated wealth and influence to reshape American government policy in ways that would benefit his business empire for generations to come. Consider what Andrew had accomplished by 1920. He controlled America's second-largest banking network, its second-largest steel production capacity, and its largest private energy production operation. But true power wouldn't come from business success alone. It would come from controlling the government policies that regulated those businesses. Chapter 5. Political Power. In 1921, Andrew Mellon became Treasury Secretary with a personal net worth larger than the annual budget of most federal agencies. This wasn't public service, it was the ultimate business acquisition. For 11 years, Andrew essentially ran the American economy while simultaneously expanding his private business empire. He reduced taxes on the wealthy by 70%, eliminated regulations that constrained his industries, and created new government policies that directly benefited Mellon companies. It was the most systematic conversion of public office into private profit in American political history. Andrew's path to power began in 1920, when Republican leaders needed funding for Warren Harding's presidential campaign. Traditional party donors were hesitant to support Harding, who was considered an outsider with limited political experience. Andrew saw an opportunity. He provided over $1 million to Harding's campaign, equivalent to about $13 million today, making him one of the largest political donors in American history up to that point. But Andrew's support came with conditions. He wanted significant input into economic policy decisions, particularly those affecting taxation and business regulation. When Harding won the presidency, Andrew expected to be consulted on major economic appointments. He was shocked when Harding offered him the Treasury Secretary position directly. Most businessmen would have seen this as an honor, but a distraction from their private affairs. Andrew recognized it as the opportunity of a lifetime. You see, Andrew understood something that most people missed about American government. The Treasury Secretary didn't just manage government finances. He essentially controlled the entire economic environment within which businesses operated. Tax rates, banking regulations, international trade policies, government spending priorities, all of these were influenced by Treasury Department decisions. Andrew's acceptance of the Treasury position was controversial from the beginning. He owned interests in companies that would be directly affected by his policy decisions. Critics argued that he should divest his business holdings to avoid conflicts of interest. Andrew refused, claiming that his business experience was precisely what qualified him for the position. What happened next was extraordinary. Instead of avoiding policies that benefited his businesses, Andrew systematically used his government position to advance Mellon family interests while presenting his actions as serving the broader public good. His first major initiative was tax reform. In 1921, the top marginal tax rate was 73%, a rate that had been implemented during World War I to fund military operations. Andrew argued that these high rates were stifling economic growth and should be reduced immediately. The tax cuts Andrew proposed weren't modest adjustments. They were fundamental restructuring of the American tax system. He wanted to reduce the top rate from 73% to 25%, eliminate the excess profits tax on corporations, and create new deductions that would primarily benefit wealthy individuals and large businesses. Here's what made Andrew's tax proposals particularly effective. He presented them as economic science rather than political preference. Using sophisticated economic analysis that few politicians could understand, Andrew argued that lower taxes on the wealthy would generate more government revenue by stimulating economic growth. This trickle-down theory wasn't just policy advocacy, it was a revolutionary approach to economic management that placed wealthy individuals and large corporations at the center of government strategy. Andrew essentially convinced Congress that helping rich people get richer was the best way to help everyone else. The results were immediate and dramatic. Between 1921 and 1925, Andrew succeeded in reducing the top tax rate to 25% and eliminating most business taxes. Government revenue actually increased during this period, but not because of economic growth. It increased because Andrew's policies stimulated massive economic speculation that temporarily boosted taxable activities. Look at who benefited from Andrew's tax changes. The Mellon family's annual tax liability decreased from $3 million to less than $500,000, while their income increased by over $20 million annually. The tax savings alone were equivalent to doubling their net worth every 5 years. But Andrew's most sophisticated achievement was creating tax loopholes that appeared to benefit entire industries while actually benefiting primarily Mellon-controlled companies. Consider the oil depletion allowance, which allowed oil companies to deduct 27.5% of their gross income from taxable earnings. Andrew argued that this deduction was necessary because oil companies depleted their assets through production and needed tax relief to finance new exploration. What he didn't mention was that his family controlled more oil production than any other private entity, meaning they would receive the largest benefit from this industry-wide tax break. The same pattern applied to aluminum production credits, coal mining deductions, and banking regulation changes. Andrew systematically created government policies that appeared neutral but were specifically designed to benefit Mellon business interests. What's remarkable is how Andrew coordinated his government policies with his family's business strategies. When he created new tax incentives for oil exploration, Mellon companies were already positioned to take maximum advantage. When he eliminated regulations on banking consolidation, Mellon banks were ready to acquire competitors. The coordination was so precise that some economists later concluded that Andrew's government policies added over $100 million to Mellon family wealth, money that came directly from reduced taxes and favorable regulations rather than business operations. Meanwhile, Andrew's brothers and cousins were using the favorable policy environment to expand Mellon business operations aggressively. Between 1921 and 1929, Mellon companies acquired over 300 competitors, created new monopolies in emerging industries, and established dominant positions in sectors they had never previously entered. Here's what made this expansion possible. Andrew's policies had created an economic environment where large companies with access to capital could acquire smaller competitors easily. Tax advantages favored big businesses over small ones. Banking regulations favored established institutions over new entrants. Trade policies favored companies with existing international operations. The Mellon family was positioned to benefit from all these advantages simultaneously. By 1929, they controlled significant market shares in banking, steel, oil, coal, aluminum, chemicals, and transportation, a level of economic concentration that would have been impossible without the favorable government policies Andrew had created. But Andrew's influence extended beyond economic policy. As Treasury Secretary, he had access to confidential government information about planned infrastructure projects, military contracts, and international trade negotiations. This information allowed Mellon companies to position themselves advantageously for upcoming opportunities. Consider the St. Lawrence Seaway project, which was being planned in secret during the mid-1920s. Andrew learned about the project years before it was announced publicly and used this knowledge to acquire shipping companies and port facilities that would benefit from the new transportation route. The same pattern applied to highway construction projects, military base expansions, and international trade agreements. Andrew consistently used confidential government information to guide Mellon family investment decisions, generating profits that would have been impossible through normal business operations. The truth is, Andrew had created a systematic method for converting government access into private wealth. His position as Treasury Secretary gave him advanced knowledge of policy changes, confidential information about government plans, and the ability to influence regulations affecting his industries. By 1929, the Mellon family's net worth had increased from $100 million to over $500 million, a five-fold increase in just 8 years. Most of this growth came not from business operations, but from the favorable policy environment Andrew had created and the confidential information he had accessed. But Andrew's greatest achievement wasn't the wealth itself. It was creating a system that would allow future generations to maintain their advantages regardless of changing political conditions. The tax structures, regulatory frameworks, and business relationships he had established would continue benefiting the Mellon family for decades after he left government service. However, this systematic use of government power for private gain was about to face its ultimate test. The stock market crash of 1929 would destroy many American fortunes, but for the Mellons, it would represent the greatest opportunity in their family's history. Chapter 6: Tax Schemes. The Mellon family's most sophisticated achievement wasn't building businesses, it was creating a tax avoidance system so complex that the IRS is still trying to understand it today. When Andrew Mellon died in 1937, his estate paid $7 million in federal taxes. But financial investigators later discovered that his true wealth was hidden in a network of trusts, foundations, and offshore entities worth over $200 million. The Mellons had effectively made 95% of their fortune invisible to tax authorities. The foundation of their tax strategy was a simple principle. Wealth that officially belongs to institutions rather than individuals isn't subject to personal income or estate taxes. Between 1920 and 1935, the Mellons transferred the majority of their assets to entities they controlled but didn't technically own. Andrew's first major tax scheme was the Mellon Institute, established in 1913 as a scientific research foundation. The institute received millions in donations from Mellon companies and used the funds to conduct research that coincidentally benefited Mellon business interests. The donations were tax-deductible for the companies, and the Institute's activities weren't subject to corporate or personal taxes. But the Institute wasn't just a tax shelter, it was a sophisticated business intelligence operation. Institute researchers studied emerging technologies, analyzed competitors' operations, and identified new investment opportunities. The research was funded with tax-deductible dollars, but generated insights that helped Mellon companies maintain their competitive advantages. Here's what made the Institute particularly clever. It provided legitimate scientific research that universities and government agencies relied upon, making it virtually immune to criticism. Who would question a foundation dedicated to advancing human knowledge? The Institute model was so successful that Andrew expanded it throughout the 1920s. The Mellon Educational Foundation funded universities and research programs. The Mellon Cultural Foundation supported museums and artistic institutions. The Mellon Health Foundation financed medical research and hospital construction. Each foundation served dual purposes, providing tax deductions for Mellon companies, while supporting activities that enhanced the family's reputation and influence. By 1930, these foundations controlled assets worth over $50 million, while generating tax savings of approximately $15 million annually. You see, Andrew had discovered that charitable activities weren't just good for society. They were incredibly profitable for wealthy families who understood how to structure them properly. Every dollar donated to Mellon foundations reduced taxable income by $1. But the foundations continued investing their assets and generating returns that ultimately benefited Mellon interests. Andrew's next innovation was the family trust system. Instead of owning assets directly, family members became beneficiaries of trusts that technically owned their wealth. The trusts could generate income for beneficiaries without creating taxable events, and trust assets weren't subject to estate taxes when beneficiaries died. The trust structures Andrew created were extraordinarily complex. A single piece of Mellon property might be owned by a trust, managed by a second trust, and have its income distributed through a third trust. This complexity made it virtually impossible for tax authorities to trace the true ownership and value of Mellon assets. Consider the Mellon family's Pittsburgh mansion, which was officially owned by the Allegheny Cultural Trust, managed by the Pennsylvania Heritage Foundation, and occupied by family members who paid rent to a separate entity called Residential Services Corporation. Each entity was controlled by different family members, creating a web of relationships that obscured the true nature of the arrangement. The mansion arrangement generated multiple tax benefits. The trusts could deduct property maintenance expenses, the rental payments were business expenses for the family members, and the property's appreciation was never subject to personal income taxes. A single piece of real estate had been transformed into a complex financial instrument that generated tax savings year after year. Here's what's remarkable about the Mellon trust system. It wasn't just about avoiding taxes, it was about creating permanent wealth that would benefit future generations regardless of changes in tax law. Trust assets could grow indefinitely without being subject to estate taxes, meaning the family's wealth would compound over generations without significant tax reduction. Andrew's most sophisticated scheme was international tax arbitrage. He established companies in countries with favorable tax treaties with the United States, then structured transactions to take advantage of differences between American and foreign tax laws. For example, the Mellon Bahamas Trading Company officially purchased raw materials from Mellon U.S. operations at high prices, processed them minimally, then sold finished products back to U.S. companies at low prices. This arrangement moved profits from high-tax U.S. operations to low-tax Bahamas operations without changing the underlying business activities. The Bahamas company wasn't just a tax dodge, it was a sophisticated financial engineering operation that optimized the family's global tax liability. Between 1925 and 1935, international tax arbitrage saved the Mellons an estimated $25 million in U.S. taxes, while generating additional profits from currency fluctuations and international trade advantages. Look at the coordination between different components of the Mellon tax system. Foundations provided tax deductions, trusts sheltered ongoing income, and international companies minimized global tax liability. Each element was legal individually, but the combined effect was a comprehensive system that made most Mellon wealth invisible to tax authorities. The system was so effective that between 1920 and 1935, the Mellon family's reported taxable income totaled less than $30 million, while their actual wealth increased by over $200 million. They had essentially achieved permanent tax exemption while continuing to accumulate vast wealth. What made the Mellon tax strategies particularly powerful was their legitimacy. Everything was documented properly, filed correctly, and structured according to existing law. Tax authorities couldn't challenge the arrangements because they didn't violate any specific regulations. But Andrew's greatest achievement was creating a tax system that would continue benefiting the family even after major changes in tax law. When estate taxes were increased in the 1930s, Mellon wealth was already sheltered in trusts. When corporate taxes were raised in the 1940s, Mellon businesses were structured as partnerships and other entities that weren't subject to corporate taxation. The truth is, Andrew had anticipated that tax rates would eventually increase and had created structures that would maintain the family's advantages regardless of future policy changes. By the time politicians recognized the need for tax reform, the Mellons had already positioned their wealth beyond the reach of new regulations. During the 1930s, as America struggled through the Great Depression and desperately needed tax revenue, investigations revealed the scope of Mellon tax avoidance. Congressional hearings exposed foundation schemes, trust manipulations, and international tax arbitrage that had cost the federal government hundreds of millions in lost revenue. But here's what's interesting about the congressional investigations. They couldn't recover the lost taxes because all the Mellon arrangements were technically legal under existing law. The investigations led to new regulations, but those regulations only applied to future transactions, not past arrangements. Meanwhile, the Mellons were using their tax savings to acquire distressed assets during the Depression. While other wealthy families struggled with increased tax burdens and reduced incomes, the Mellons had preserved their capital and were positioned to benefit from economic recovery. By 1940, financial experts estimated that the Mellon family's tax avoidance schemes had generated savings equivalent to doubling their net worth. Money that would have been paid to the government had instead been invested in additional assets that continued generating returns for future generations. The tax system Andrew created became the template for sophisticated wealth management throughout the 20th century. Wealthy families, corporations, and financial institutions adopted variations of Mellon's strategies to minimize their own tax liabilities. Modern offshore banking, charitable foundation management, and trust-based estate planning all trace their origins to innovations Andrew developed during the 1920s and 1930s. The Mellons hadn't just avoided taxes, they had invented the methods that would allow wealthy individuals to avoid taxes for generations to come. But the family's most audacious scheme was still to come. As World War II created new opportunities and challenges, the Mellons would demonstrate that their tax avoidance system was just one component of a larger strategy to maintain their wealth and influence through any economic or political disruption. Chapter 7. Modern influence today. The Mellon family controls over $12 billion in assets, but their real power comes from institutions most Americans have never heard of. The Mellon Foundation isn't just a charitable organization. It's one of the largest sources of funding for American universities, museums, and cultural institutions. When you visit a major art museum, attend a prestigious university, or benefit from medical research, there's a strong chance Mellon money made it possible. This isn't coincidence. It's the result of a sophisticated influence strategy that the Mellons have refined over generations. By funding institutions that shape public opinion, cultural values, and policy discussions, they maintain enormous influence over American society without holding official political positions. Consider Carnegie Mellon University, which was created through a Mellon Foundation merger with Andrew Carnegie's educational institutions in 1967. The university isn't just named after the family. It's essentially a Mellon-controlled institution that trains future leaders in technology, business, and public policy. Carnegie Mellon's computer science program has produced executives for major technology companies. Its business school has trained Wall Street leaders, and its public policy programs have educated government officials. Thousands of influential Americans received their education at an institution that reflects Mellon values and priorities. The university connection provides the Mellons with something more valuable than money: access to emerging talent and advanced knowledge of technological developments. Carnegie Mellon researchers often share their findings with Mellon Foundation representatives before publishing them publicly, giving the family early insights into innovations that could affect their investments. You see, the modern Mellon strategy isn't about controlling specific industries. It's about controlling the flow of information, ideas, and talent that shapes how American society develops. They don't need to own technology companies if they can influence the people who create new technologies. The Mellon Foundation's art and culture initiatives serve similar purposes. By funding major museums and cultural institutions, the family shapes public discussions about art, history, and social values. Museum exhibitions, academic conferences, and cultural programs often reflect perspectives that align with Mellon interests. This cultural influence matters because museums and universities are considered neutral, objective institutions. When a major museum presents an exhibition about American business history, viewers assume they're getting unbiased information. They don't realize that Mellon funding might have influenced which stories are told and how they're presented. Here's what makes the modern Mellon influence strategy particularly sophisticated. It operates through multiple layers of institutions, making it virtually impossible to trace direct connections between family interests and public outcomes. For example, the Mellon Foundation funds university research programs, which produce studies that influence government policy discussions. The foundation also funds think tanks that analyze those studies and make policy recommendations. Finally, the foundation supports media organizations that report on the policy recommendations. At each stage, the connection to Mellon interests becomes more indirect, but the cumulative effect is to shape public policy discussions in ways that benefit the family's long-term interests. This approach is far more effective than traditional lobbying because it influences the intellectual framework within which policy decisions are made. Look at environmental policy, an area where modern Mellon interests are complex. The family still controls significant oil and coal assets through various trusts and investment vehicles, but they also have major investments in renewable energy technologies through their venture capital activities. Mellon-funded environmental research often emphasizes solutions that require large-scale technological investments rather than regulatory restrictions on existing industries. This approach allows the family to benefit from both traditional energy assets and emerging clean energy markets, while avoiding policies that would severely harm either set of investments. The Mellon Foundation's education initiatives follow similar patterns. Instead of opposing public education, the foundation funds programs that emphasize technological solutions and private sector partnerships. This approach shapes education policy discussions in ways that create markets for Mellon-connected companies, while maintaining the foundation's reputation as an education supporter. What's remarkable is how the Mellons have adapted their influence strategies to changing political conditions. During the 1960s and 1970s, when public suspicion of wealthy families was high, they reduced their direct political activities and increased their cultural and educational funding. During the 1980s and 1990s, when business-friendly policies were more popular, they became more active in supporting think tanks and policy organizations that advocated for reduced regulation and lower taxes. They didn't change their goals, they changed their methods to match the political environment. The truth is, the modern Mellon family operates more like a sophisticated intelligence organization than a traditional wealthy family. They gather information through their university connections, analyze trends through their think tank funding, and implement strategies through their foundation activities. This systematic approach to influence has allowed them to benefit from major economic and social changes that destroyed other wealthy families. When environmental movements emerged in the 1970s, the Mellons were already positioned as environmental research supporters. When technology became central to economic growth in the 1990s, they were already connected to leading computer science programs. Consider how the family has positioned itself for the current era of technological disruption. Mellon venture capital funds have invested in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and renewable energy companies. Mellon-funded research programs study the social implications of technological change. Mellon cultural institutions explore how technology affects human creativity and social relationships. Each investment serves multiple purposes, generating financial returns, providing early access to emerging technologies, and shaping public discussions about how society should adapt to technological change. This integrated approach ensures that the Mellons will benefit from technological developments, regardless of which specific technologies become dominant. Here's what's most impressive about the modern Mellon strategy. It's designed to maintain family influence, even if individual family members aren't particularly talented or interested in business affairs. The institutional structure operates almost automatically, requiring minimal direct involvement from family members. Current family members serve on foundation boards and make general policy decisions, but day-to-day operations are handled by professional staff who understand the family's long-term objectives. This structure ensures continuity across generations while protecting individual family members from public scrutiny. The financial results speak for themselves. Between 1990 and 2020, Mellon family wealth increased from approximately $3 billion to over $12 billion, despite significant charitable donations and family expenditures. Their investment returns have consistently exceeded market averages, largely because their institutional connections provide access to information and opportunities that aren't available to typical investors. But the family's most significant achievement isn't financial. It's creating a sustainable system for maintaining wealth and influence across generations. Unlike many wealthy families that lose their fortunes within a few generations, the Mellons have created institutional structures that should preserve their advantages indefinitely. Modern technology has actually enhanced the Mellon influence system. Digital communications allow their various institutions to coordinate more effectively. Data analysis helps them identify emerging trends earlier. Global financial markets provide more opportunities for sophisticated investment strategies. The family has also adapted their strategies to global conditions. Mellon foundations now fund international programs, Mellon investment vehicles operate worldwide, and Mellon-supported institutions have global reach. This international expansion provides access to emerging markets while diversifying their influence beyond American institutions. Look at the numbers from 2020. Mellon foundations distributed over $300 million in grants to hundreds of institutions worldwide. This isn't just charity. It's a systematic investment in maintaining global influence that generates returns far exceeding the original expenditures. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the modern Mellon empire is how invisible it remains to most Americans. Despite controlling billions in assets and influencing major institutions, the family rarely appears in media coverage of wealthy Americans or powerful families. This invisibility is deliberate and carefully maintained. Family members avoid publicity, their companies operate under various names, and their influence is exercised through institutions rather than direct political activities. Most Americans benefit from Mellon-funded programs without realizing the connection to this centuries-old dynasty. However, this sophisticated influence system faces new challenges in an era of increased transparency and social media scrutiny. The methods that allowed the Mellons to operate invisibly for generations may not work in a world where financial relationships and institutional connections are more easily exposed. What most people don't realize is that the Mellons never actually left the banking business. They just made it invisible. While traditional banks like JP Chase and Bank of America operate under intense regulatory scrutiny, the Mellons control a network of private investment funds, family offices, and specialized financial services that handle trillions of dollars with virtually no public oversight. This shadow banking system has become more profitable than traditional banking while avoiding the regulations that constrain conventional financial institutions. The modern Mellon financial empire operates through dozens of interconnected entities, with names like Allegheny Capital Management, Pennsylvania Investment Services, and Pittsburgh Asset Holdings. Each entity appears to be an independent financial firm, but they share personnel, coordinate strategies, and move capital between themselves in ways that would be impossible for regulated banks. Consider how sophisticated this coordination has become. When one Mellon entity identifies an attractive investment opportunity, it can quickly access capital from other family entities without the regulatory approvals, disclosure requirements, or shareholder consultations that slow down traditional financial institutions. This speed advantage allows them to secure the best deals before larger competitors even know they're available. The shadow banking network also provides services that traditional banks can't offer. Wealthy clients who need complex international transactions, sophisticated tax optimization strategies, or investment opportunities in emerging markets can access these services through Mellon entities without the compliance restrictions that limit conventional banks. Here's what makes this particularly powerful. The Mellon shadow banking system serves as the financial infrastructure for other wealthy families, major corporations, and even foreign governments. By providing essential services that clients can't obtain elsewhere, the Mellons maintain influence over financial decisions that affect the entire global economy. Look at the numbers. Financial industry analysts estimate that Mellon-controlled entities manage over $200 billion in assets for external clients, generating billions in fees while providing the family with detailed information about major investment flows, corporate strategies, and government financial activities. This information advantage is more valuable than the fees themselves. By serving as financial intermediaries for major economic players, the Mellons gain early knowledge of mergers, acquisitions, policy changes, and market developments that allow them to position their own investments advantageously. The shadow banking system also serves as a recruiting mechanism for top financial talent. Professionals who work for Mellon entities develop expertise in sophisticated financial strategies while building relationships with the family's investment managers. Many eventually start their own firms, but maintain informal connections to the Mellon network, extending the family's influence throughout the financial industry. The Mellons have quietly become one of the most influential forces in American technology development. But their approach is fundamentally different from famous tech investors like Peter Thiel or Mark Andreessen. Instead of seeking revolutionary breakthroughs that disrupt existing industries, the Mellons focus on technologies that enhance the efficiency and profitability of established systems. Their venture capital funds consistently invest in enterprise software, industrial automation, financial technology, and healthcare innovations that make existing institutions more powerful rather than replacing them. This strategy reflects a sophisticated understanding of how technological change actually occurs. While media attention focuses on dramatic disruptions like social media or electric vehicles, the biggest economic impacts often come from incremental improvements that make existing processes more efficient and profitable. Mellon venture funds have invested in hundreds of technology companies since the 1990s, but their portfolio shows clear patterns. They avoid consumer-facing technologies that generate public attention and focus on business-to-business solutions that operate invisibly but become essential infrastructure for other companies. Consider their approach to artificial intelligence. While other investors competed for stakes in high-profile AI companies developing autonomous vehicles or virtual assistants, Mellon funds focused on AI applications for financial analysis, medical diagnosis, and industrial optimization. These technologies generate less media coverage but create more sustainable competitive advantages. The coordination between Mellon venture investments and their traditional institutional activities has become extraordinarily sophisticated. Universities receiving Mellon funding often serve as testing grounds for technologies developed by Mellon-backed companies. Medical institutions supported by Mellon foundations implement healthcare technologies from Mellon investment portfolios. Cultural organizations funded by Mellon money use software and systems developed by Mellon-connected firms. This institutional integration provides guaranteed markets for Mellon technology investments, while generating real-world performance data that helps refine products before broader commercial launch. It's a systematic method for reducing investment risk while accelerating returns that no traditional venture capital fund can match. The technology strategy also serves as a talent pipeline for the broader Mellon empire. Entrepreneurs who receive Mellon funding often become long-term partners in other ventures. Engineers and executives from Mellon-backed companies frequently join other family enterprises. This network effect amplifies the impact of individual investments while building relationships that generate opportunities for decades. Here's what's particularly remarkable about the Mellon technology approach. They've managed to benefit from every major technology trend of the past 3 decades without becoming identified with any specific technology sector. Their diversified approach has allowed them to profit from internet development, mobile computing, cloud services, and artificial intelligence, while avoiding the volatility that destroyed many technology-focused investors. Perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of modern Mellon influence is their systematic approach to policy development. They don't just lobby for specific legislation, they create the intellectual infrastructure that shapes how policymakers think about major issues. The process begins with foundation-funded research at major universities. Mellon foundations provide grants for academic studies of economic policy, environmental regulation, healthcare reform, and technology governance. These studies appear to be neutral academic research, but the funding guidelines and research priorities consistently emphasize approaches that align with Mellon business interests. The academic research then feeds into think tank analysis. Organizations like the American Enterprise Institute, the Brookings Institution, and regional policy centers receive Mellon funding to analyze the university research and develop policy recommendations. These think tanks have credibility with policymakers and media organizations, making their recommendations influential in political discussions. The think tank recommendations are then amplified through media coverage. News organizations, including public television and radio stations that receive Mellon cultural funding, report on the policy studies and recommendations. Editorial writers and opinion columnists, many of whom participate in programs funded by Mellon foundations, incorporate the ideas into their commentary. Finally, the policy ideas reach government decision-makers through multiple channels. Academic researchers testify before congressional committees. Think tank analysts brief government agencies. Media coverage shapes public opinion and political pressure. The cumulative effect is to make Mellon-favored policies appear to be the consensus of expert opinion rather than the preferences of a single wealthy family. This policy manufacturing process is so sophisticated that most participants don't realize they're part of a coordinated influence campaign. University researchers genuinely believe they're conducting independent academic studies. Think tank analysts honestly think they're developing objective policy recommendations. Media organizations truly believe they're reporting on neutral expert analysis. The key insight is that the Mellons don't control the specific content of research or analysis. They influence the framework within which research questions are asked and policy options are evaluated. By funding institutions that naturally develop perspectives aligned with their interests, they achieve systematic influence without direct manipulation. Consider how this worked with financial regulation after the 2008 economic crisis. Instead of opposing all financial reforms, Mellon-funded research emphasized regulatory approaches that would apply primarily to large traditional banks while creating opportunities for alternative financial institutions like the ones the Mellons controlled. The research appeared to support stronger financial regulation, but the specific recommendations would have increased competitive advantages for Mellon's shadow banking operations while constraining their traditional banking competitors. This approach allowed the family to appear supportive of reform while actually benefiting from regulatory changes. The Mellons have systematically expanded their influence operations beyond American institutions to create a global network that rivals the diplomatic capabilities of many governments. Their international strategy operates through the same institutional approach they use domestically, but with additional complexity due to different legal systems, cultural contexts, and political structures. Mellon foundations now fund educational exchanges, cultural programs, and research initiatives in over 50 countries. These international programs serve multiple purposes. They create goodwill with foreign governments and institutions. They provide access to emerging markets and technologies, and they generate intelligence about international business opportunities. The programs appear to be charitable activities promoting international cooperation, but they consistently advance Mellon business interests. Consider their approach to emerging markets in Asia and Africa. Instead of simply investing in foreign companies, the Mellons fund educational programs that train local professionals in Western business practices, cultural exchanges that build relationships with future leaders, and research initiatives that study economic development opportunities. These programs create networks of international contacts who naturally develop favorable impressions of American institutions and business approaches. Former exchange participants often become business and political leaders in their home countries, providing the Mellons with valuable connections and insights about local conditions. The International Foundation activities also provide legitimate reasons for Mellon family members and associates to travel globally, meet with foreign leaders, and gather intelligence about international business opportunities. This access is far more valuable than simple investment capital because it provides early information about political changes, regulatory developments, and economic trends. The Global Influence Network has become particularly important as American domestic opportunities have become more competitive and regulated. International markets offer opportunities for growth and profit that are increasingly difficult to find in the United States. But success in foreign markets requires the kind of cultural knowledge and political connections that the Mellon International programs systematically develop. Look at how this integrated approach works in practice. A Mellon Foundation might fund an environmental research program in Southeast Asia, providing access to information about regional climate policies and renewable energy opportunities. Simultaneously, Mellon investment funds might be evaluating clean energy investments in the same region, using insights gained through the foundation activities to identify the most promising opportunities. The foundation work provides cover for investment-related travel and meetings while generating goodwill with local governments and institutions. This approach allows the Mellons to pursue business opportunities while maintaining their reputation as philanthropic supporters of international cooperation and development. By 2020, the global Mellon influence network had become so extensive that family members could arrange meetings with senior government officials, business leaders, and cultural figures in virtually any major country within weeks of expressing interest. This access provides enormous advantages for international business development while maintaining the appearance of cultural and educational exchange rather than commercial activity. The international expansion represents the ultimate evolution of the Mellon influence model. Systematic conversion of apparently charitable activities into sustainable competitive advantages that operate across multiple countries and cultures while maintaining the family's characteristic invisibility and respectability.